All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We have a little bit of an out of order experience here because our moderator, Chaya, is not here yet, but we hope she will be soon. I'm going to get some housekeeping details out of the way in the meantime. My name is Stacy, and I'm a bookseller and the events coordinator at Belmont Books. Belmont Books, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is an independent and locally owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a number of virtual events coming up, including Glenn Stout discussing his new book, Tiger Girl and the Candy Kid, with former NPR Only a Game host Bill Littlefield, and that's on Tuesday. And then we have Michelle Duster discussing her book about her great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, with Boston Globe's Renee Graham, and that's on Wednesday. You can register for these and our other events on our website, belmontbooks.com, which is also where you can purchase tonight's book, Black Buck. A special feature of tonight's events is the opportunity to put Mateo's book into the hands of students at the John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science in Roxbury. The school will be hosting Mateo later in the month. If you're able to contribute a copy of the book, 826 Boston, a nonprofit, youth writing and publishing organization, will distribute the books to the school. And I will send out the link in the chat in case you want to do that later. If you have any concerns during the presentation, you can send a message to me in the chat section. And if you have any questions for the authors, please type them into the Q&A section. And we will get to as many questions as we can. And we're very excited to welcome Mateo, Chaya, and special guest, Christian Morris. I want to tell you a little bit about Chaya. If she's here, I'm going to check that. Let's
Come
see.
in. She's there. Yeah.
Oh, you're here. Great.
Summoned her.
She's just connecting. Okay, wonderful. Hi, Chaya. You have your audio going there?
Great. Oh,
Okay,
I see it.
great.
You've got lots of participants already
Yes,
on. That's excellent.
Yeah, we started and I was just about to do your intro and then I will turn it over to you if you're ready.
Great.
Okay. Chaya is a practicing physician, writer, and Pan American Robert W. Bingham Debut Fiction Prize finalist for White Dancing Elephants stories, whose work has appeared in numerous publications. Her work was recently selected for inclusion in Best Small Fictions. Her poetry and prose juxtapose Hindu's epics, other myths and histories, and the survival of sexual harassment and racialized sexual violence by queer and other diverse women of color. Can't think of anything more timely than all of that, and we look forward to this great discussion tonight. I'm going to mute myself and turn myself off and have a great event.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being with us. The genesis of this particular event, especially given, Mateo's huge profile as a Jenna's Book Club selected book author and a New York Times bestseller. But what is really cool is that this event started in a very small way of my reading his book and being so affected by it and so really in love with it. And I'll explain, you'll see how I'm in love with it when I ask him the questions, and you'll be in love with it by then too, because he's going to read from it. But it just really started with that spontaneous response and recognition that he has done something really groundbreaking here. He has done something really unique that is going to last. And like I said in the DM, that I believe this book is going to be read alongside Invisible Man, and not as well as other satirical novels, but it cuts at that level of, sediment and ground rock. So without further ado, he was a 2018 Rhode Island Writers Colony writer in residence. Before the debut novel that has so much buzz around it. His writing has appeared in Entrepreneur, Lit Hub. Some of you may have seen the essay on craft that he wrote that I tweeted out, The Rumpus, Medium, and Elsewhere. And one description of the book that I thought was really well written, I think this is courtesy of HMH, is For fans of Sorry to Bother You and The Wolf of Wall Street, a crackling satirical debut novel about a young man given a shot at stardom as the lone Black salesman at a mysterious cult-like and wildly successful startup where nothing is as it seems. So we will get to his reading, and then I think, Mateo, what the way you envision the structure is we will have you read and then do a Q&A, and then we will be able to hear from a very talented poet, Christian Morris, whose collection you read and who, you know, on that basis you invited to perform for us tonight. Thank you so much for doing that, because I'm a huge poetry and spoken word fan, and I'm proud to call Dana Smith and Layla Chatty and a couple other poets of color my friends. So I'm very thrilled you're reading for us. But I think what we're going to do is have Mateo read. I'll ask a few questions. I really only have 3. And then Mateo will introduce Christian in more detail. We hear from Christian, and then we'll get Q&A from the audience. Does that sound good? Or
That sounds great. You know what? You
okay.
almost recited a line from the book. Sound fair?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
I learned from your handbook.
oh, yeah, I can tell. You're spitting right now. Yeah, I'll take it away with the reading. Chaya, thank you so much.
Excellent. Excellent.
And like Chaya said, this started through a DM. You know, we knew who each other were from the Twitter world, and we're always showing each other love. And then she read the book, as she said, and we just got a dialogue going about our lives, about a book like this, and about the power of reading. And we manifested an event with all of you here. So this is the beauty of not just writing, but literary citizenship, and being able to vibe with genuine people who are really here for you and uplifting your work. And I see some people in the audience, you know, I saw in the chat, shout out to Deborah, Heather, everyone. You know, I see some people from Instagram in here, Isabel, Megan, Jesse Liberty. All right, man. I also see a woman in here who I would refer to as my mother. Hello. All right, I'm gonna kick it off with a reading, and then you know, like Chaya said, we're gonna do a Q&A. She's making me a little nervous by saying she only has 3 questions. Usually, right, we're going for quality over quantity here. I'd rather take 10, right, rather than 3 pointed ones, and especially she had time, so your boy is sweating a little bit. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about my background and how Christian and I cross each other's paths, and we'll go from there. Thank you for being here. I will read from the beginning of the author's note. And now that I'm remembering it, let me say this author's note was written by my protagonist, Darren, who later becomes known as Buck. Right? Sometimes people, when they read the book, they miss it and they think that this entire novel is nonfiction and that it is all being, you know, told to the reader through me, which is okay too. But tonight I'd like to clarify. All right, author's note. There's nothing like a Black man on a mission. No, let me revise that. There's nothing like a Black salesman on a mission. He's Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, and any other supernatural, paranormal, or otherwise godlike combination of blood, flesh, and brains. He can't die. Don't believe me? MLK. Yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a Black salesman. In the same way used car salesmen hawk overpriced hunks of metal that break down once an unsuspecting customer drives off the lot, our man ML to the goddamn K was a salesman to the highest degree. Not only did he sell Black people on the vision of a unified America, but he also sold the United States Supreme Court, which at the time contained 9 white men, the hardest decision makers for any Black man to convince. MLK, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Frederick Douglass were all salesmen. Hell, Nina Simone, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, and every other Black woman who achieved any leap of success was a saleswoman. Oprah, hide a BMW under your seat. Winfrey is a saleswoman. You get the point. Each and every one of these people was selling something more precious than gold, a vision for what the world could look like if millions of people were to change their minds, the hardest thing to change. How do I fit into all of this? Oh, I shut up and get to the point? Don't worry, I'm getting there. I'm a Black man on a mission. No, I'm a Black salesman on a mission. And the point of this book, which I'm writing from my penthouse overlooking Central Park, is to help other Black men and women on a mission to sell their visions all the way to the top. So high up that I'll have to crane my neck, like one of those goofy white people in films deciding whether a superhero is a bird or a plane, just to catch a glimpse of them before they're out of sight. Whoosh, bang, poof. The Great Disappearing Act of Success. My goal is to teach you how to sell. And if I'm half the salesman every newspaper, blog, and hustler in New York City says I am, then you are in luck. With my story, I will give you the tools to go out and create the life you want, to overcome every seemingly impossible obstacle, to fix the game. Which game, you ask? We'll get there. But before we do, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. 1, let down your guard and open your mind to what I'm going to tell you. I know, we're strangers right now. You're likely asking yourself why you should trust me. The good thing is that you already bought this book, so you trusted me enough to part with $26. I won't let you down. 2, understand that I want all people to be successful. But in the same way that Starbucks can't just give out mocha frappuccinos to anyone who doesn't have $14, I can't help everyone. So I'm starting with Black people. If you're not Black but have this book in your hands, I want you to think of yourself as an honorary Black person. Go on, do it. Don't go don blackface in an afro, but picture yourself as Black. And if you want, you can even give yourself a fancy Black name, like Jamal, Lamani, or Asia. 3, say every day is Deals Day and clap your hands. I know it's strange, but do it. And when you do, think of the number one thing you're working toward. It may be a new car, a promotion, someone's affection, or an expensive pair of shoes. Whatever it is, think of it and say, every day is Deals Day, and clap your hands as loud as you can. As you'll find out, every day is Deals Day. A day without deals is like a camel without humps. It doesn't exist. At this point, your heart's beating and there's a twinkle in your eye. I know because I've given this speech before. I've given it to myself. I've given it to thousands of people wanting to change their lives. And I've given it to people who didn't know they wanted to change but needed it. A long time ago, I was one of these people. I was like you, ambitious but afraid, intelligent but impotent, curious but cowardly. I was all of this and more. But freedom, true freedom, the kind where you do what you want without fear, comes at a cost. It's like my urban corner philosopher come fairy god Uncle Wally Cat used to say. You can change the hands of a clock, but you can't change time. I can give you the tools to change, but only you can change yourself. And if I'm successful in teaching you how to sell and fix the game, I ask that you buy another copy of my book and give it to the friend who needs it most, who was stuck like I was and in need of a way out, who was blind to the game but has potential, just like you. Does that sound fair? If so, and if you can do the 3 things I outlined above, then we have a deal. And if we have a deal, it's time for you to do one last thing. Turn the page. Happy selling. Buck. There it is.
There it is. Oh my gosh. Well, I think Colson Whitehead had this great quote about how it just with the first page it just gets you right there. So I have these questions, but I don't what I'm going to do is also leave time if there's something in particular that has come up at other readings that you want to make sure to communicate about to our audience, but first I'm going to start by asking, you've written before about your writing process, benefits of writing fairly quickly, willingness to kind of move through other novels, as you needed to get to this one and then build on that and not feel like it should take someone 25 years to write and publish a novel. Especially given that many people in the audience might aspire to publish their writing or develop as writers. Do you have 5 top pieces of advice? It's like a sales appendix in some ways, but but honestly, like, do you view what you wrote in that LitHub essay as still being as true for you? Have your views changed? What do you think are the most important things you now would pass on to somebody learning from this book and feeling inspired by it to write?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I really appreciate it because I love to riff on writing, but I don't do it that often in events. So thank you for the opportunity. And everyone else, if you have questions, drop them in that Q&A at the bottom, the Q&A form, and we'll get to them later. Just wanted to encourage you. Any and all questions are welcome. And what Chaya is referring to is an article that I wrote in favor of speed. It came out in LitHub. and it was about why I like to write fast. But, you know, I don't begrudge anyone. I don't think that it's wrong for anyone to take, you know, 2 decades or 3 decades to write a book. It's more so about going at your pace. And me, I don't have a formal writing background. So I wasn't as indoctrinated from the world of like the MFA, where I have friends who say, man, you know, I got my MFA and I'm afraid to write. But the good thing is that if I do write 10 pages a month, I know that they're solid, right? Whereas me, when I came into this world of writing, and even with Black Buck, I had an editor tell me, she said, and not my current editor, just an early reader, she said, Mateo, the good thing about you not having your MFA, and for those who don't know, it's a master's in fine art, what people go to when they're getting their master's in writing and in some ways learning how to write. She said, the good thing about you not having your MFA is that you're not afraid to write. The bad thing is that you're not disciplined on the page. And I said, well, I'll take that any day. And she was basically remarking the fact that my first draft was 168,000 words. Like that's 50 to 100 pages less than Moby Dick probably. But that is how I found that I write best, in terms of not judging myself when I come to the page and knowing, and I got this from a guy named James Scott Bell, who wrote a book called Plot and Structure that I read when I was trying to figure out how to write, what it meant to be a writer. And he said, revision or revising a book is like taking an open book test in school as many times as you want. You can continue, especially with your first book where people don't know who you are and don't know that you're working on anything. You can take as much time as you want on revising. But with that said, to answer one of your questions, Chaya, yes, that article still does ring true to me, because I know that for me, my main goal, or one of my main goals with the manuscript, is to finish it. Of course, I wanted to do certain things. Of course, I want to imbue it with feeling. I want there to be memorable characters. I want there to, I want it to incite feelings in the reader that will stick with them, right? We talk about stickiness or emotional resonance. So I want all of that. But beyond all of that, I want to finish it, because so many people never finish their work, or they never begin it because they're afraid of the thought that they might not finish. So I've just had to train myself to get over that. And in terms of, you know, but again, if it takes me 5 years to write a book, maybe that's fast in comparison to 50 years that it could have taken me to write a book. Every book is different. So I just say, you know, I guess here's one of 5, one of 5 pieces of advice is work at your own speed, work at your own pace. Some people run a mile in 15 minutes. Some people run it in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Still a mile, right? So write at your own pace. 2 is be careful of who you take feedback from. I mentioned a guy named James Scott Bell. I was lucky in that with my first manuscript, those first 2 manuscripts I threw out, but with my first manuscript, an agent said, Mateo, this manuscript's lacking plot and structure. If you get the plot and structure right, then I might consider representing you. Fortunately, it didn't work out, like for many reasons. But when she told me that, I said, okay, I need to learn more about plot and structure. So I did this really thorough scientific way of learning how to, you know, write plot and structure, which was Googling the words plot and structure and then finding the first book that came up. And listen, I'm not proud of it, but it was on Amazon. I got it off Amazon in like 2017, and it had a lot of ratings. It was called Plot and Structure. And I read it, and the feedback resonated. Maybe not all of it, but the majority of it did. And I was so lucky because I think oftentimes many of us, especially when you're an aspiring creative or writer or musician or actor or what have you, even non-creative, you get all these pieces of advice, or you hear these prevailing modes of thinking, and you latch onto them, even though they don't really vibe with you, right? And you're like, oh, well, if this is what other people are saying I should do, then I should do it. And then you could have just gone 100 miles in the wrong direction. So 2 is be careful and be somewhat discerning in terms of where you get feedback from, the feedback that you listen to. 3, ask yourself why you're writing. Ask yourself why you write. Why do you write? You know, why are you doing this? For me, it was only really with Black Buck that I think I had a good answer of why I was doing it, and that helped me commit to the task. 4 is who are you writing this for? Who are you creating for? Again, just thinking in terms of Black Buck, that changed everything. Knowing why I was writing and who I was writing for changed everything for me. It allowed me to say certain things or make certain jokes, because the people I had in mind, I could make these jokes and wasn't a mixed company. You know, even though knowing that other people were going to read the book, right? But when I had the people in my mind who I was writing for, it freed me in a way. And I'm so glad for anyone who reads the book, though, right? Not just Black people. And the last I would say is, this is one, oh man, this is tough. 5 is tough now that you got me going. I'm like, man, I'm gonna do 5.5.
Sounds
All right.
good.
The one that I really cite most frequently is try not to pander to the industry. Try not to pander to what you think you need to write. This goes along with the feedback, right? What you think you need to do in order to get an agent, what you think you need to do in order to be cool with the who's who of, you know, the literary world. You know, an agent for my first manuscript, the protagonist was 17. She said, you need to age him down to 16. And that if you didn't know, you're writing young adult. And I didn't know what I was doing. I said, okay, I'm writing young adult now, you know, and I respect young adult, but I only read like 2 to 3 young adult books a year. I'm reading adult typically. But when she told me that, I just said, okay, I'm writing young adult now. And it didn't work out because I was faking the funk, you know? And the last would be, and this is going to be corny, but try to have fun. Try to have fun. If you read Black Buck, you can tell I'm having fun. I was having a ton of fun while writing it. Not all of it was peaches and sunshine and buttercups, you know, like there were some really down and sad parts. But try to have fun if possible. Whew, all right. No wonder you only asked 3. You knew that the answer
That was
probably be a long one.
excellent. No, it was very real. I mean, well, it's sort of, but you know, your last one kind of relates to my next question. So, and I mean, I will be honest with everyone, and I'm saying this as a good thing about this book. There were some scenes that cut so close to the bone of things that have been said in rooms that I have heard as a woman of color. Many of the things that Clyde, you know, says, the intimate betrayal of Trey and Darren, you know, just like, woo, you know, I had to put it down because it was so well written and real. And so that's sort of a question, you know, I feel like there were deep wounds that Darren was constantly dealing with, you know, hostility from so many different people, as well as neediness from some, like, you know, needing him to be this, needing him to be that. And then the betrayals that you know, without any plot spoilers, there are different betrayals at different levels, and he commits some of them too. And, you know, just his transformation from someone who won't even drink coffee, you know, like it's like comparing it to crack, right, to where he goes. What was your, well, see, it is obvious that you had fun from the liveliness and effectiveness of the book, but was it ever a challenge to manage your own well-being as you wrote about things that I think on a level of survival, many times we push it down a little bit, you know, in terms of just, you know, I'm trying to be vague so that people can have that sense of discovery when they read it themselves. You know, I don't want to be too specific, but I think, you know, there is a silent bargain that many people make with themselves of, okay, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do my work, and things are going to sort of go okay. And there'll be hard things that happen, but there'll be aberrations. But part of the brilliance of this book is it, like Invisible Man, exposes what is underneath. You know, so how did, maybe on a more basic, like, how did you take care of yourself emotionally? You know, how did you deal with just writing about these themes?
Yeah, there's layers to this question. I'm gonna try to address them. The taking care of myself while writing. Well, every day before I wrote, I have a routine that would more often than not work, and that I would be inspired by the time I got to the page. And part of that routine is looking at photos or was, at least with this book, looking at photos of 10 to 12 people that inspire me and that who seem to live unabashedly into their own truth through their work and even beyond it. Someone like Nina Simone, Gordon Parks, Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass, Fred Hampton, Jean-Michel Basquiat, some of the people I mentioned in the beginning, right? Oprah, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Dave Chappelle, right? And now for my second inspiration folder, someone like who's always inspired me, but I guess it hits differently. Someone like Nipsey Hussle, you know. So by the time I would come to write, it was game time, and sometimes game time meant, or every day it meant, mining my own emotional history, and if it was tough, pushing through. And that's not always good, right? That's just, maybe that's an American thing, or also a stereotypically male thing of like, I got to push through. I can't process, right? And we see this happening in the book. We see the devastating consequences of it, of Darren saying, I got to take until I make it, of him telling himself, and I put this in purposely in like the third draft, of him now telling himself, man up, man up, man up, because that's something that we often hear, something that we tell ourselves, right? Or even just women of color, toughen up. Toughen up. What, you think that it was easy for me and your ancestors and XYZ? Toughen up, you know? So that's a lot of what was happening throughout the book. There were times when I was like, damn, this hurts to write. And going back to how you started off the question, yeah, there were times that it was fun. A lot of it was fun. But then there were times when Darren, right? Because Darren wasn't a victim. And you say this, he is victimized in certain ways, but he allows it to happen as well, right? Like Darren is the type of person where he is intelligent. He has some of his own power. He allowed certain things to happen, especially in the workplace. But then, and while being vague, he then turns around and hurts the people who loved him unconditionally, Black and brown folk. So to have subjected Darren to the overt racism, the in some ways, whether we want to call it passive racism, microaggressions, to then flat out hate crimes, was hard. It wasn't like, this is going to be so fun to have this guy go through this. Nah, that wasn't, because there are people who look at Darren and say, that's me. That's my brother. That's my sister. And then to have him go and hurt these other people, right? People say, that's my mother. That's my uncle. I know someone like Wally Cat on the corner, someone like Jason, his best friend, someone like Soraya, his girlfriend. So that was definitely hard for me. But I told myself that if it's hard for me, it's going to be hard for the reader, and it has to be worth it, I hope. Like, what's the point of this, right? I was about to censor myself, but I'll say it. I read A Little Life, and it is, in the 21st century, that book goes to some of the darkest places ever, A Little Life. And I read it and I was like, oh my God. And then I've had other people who read it and were like, was it necessary? Was all of it necessary for Hanya Yanagihara to go that far? But anyway, I had to ask myself that, is it worth it? And then I asked the reader that by the end too. So yeah, that's my answer, I guess. I had to, all right, the last thing I'm going to say, now that I'm really like thinking through it even more, is that I had to persevere, but having to talk about this type of stuff every day, or not every day now, but like every day for 2 months, multiple events with multiple people about just like racism, systemic racism, hate crimes in the workplace, outside of the workplace, lack of diversity, all these things that are very important that many of us think about every day. And I know that I had before I had a book out. It's not always the easiest. It's not always the easiest, because you're sometimes looked at as a spokesperson. Just because you wrote a book, right? And of course I have thoughts and I've lived this, but I don't have a certification in diversity and inclusion. So sometimes it's tough. And sometimes I'm like, damn, after this event, did I say things that could help people or harm them? So anyway, I've never really brought that up in an event, but I'm thinking through it even more. Yeah.
I think the self-care aspect comes up because in a lot of ways, as the artist, you made yourself a really amazing conduit for all those times, all those energies that were targeted at different people, particularly by this group of elite, educated, profoundly privileged, articulate, clever, in some ways compelling white people too.
In
Do you know
some
what
ways,
I mean? Like these are people who from a distance,
yeah,
people would not know. Like
who got
the minute,
pitchforks and the
right,
hoods.
exactly. The minute you had Clyde say that thing about Arab women, it took the book to a different level. It took the book to a different level.
Yep.
Like the opening of this enormous ugliness that I think is on par with what happened in the Capitol. You know, the opening, the revealing.
Yeah.
So I actually only have one more question. I will fold the two shorter questions into one question, and that is, can you talk about which writers influence you the most? And related to that, what can we hope to read from you next?
So this first part is good because, you know, someone asked about that too. Well, The Sellout by Paul Beatty was important to me and important to this book. Not in that I was thinking, oh, how can I adapt certain aspects, but more so because when I read it before I wrote Black Buck, I said, this is crazy. What? I said, this book is wild. And it's not just wild because, again, you know, a friend asked me, you know, Mateo, are you ready for the double reading of your book? Or some people will read this. And as you've alluded to, Chaya, this is very real. This is very real for me. And then other people who aren't so familiar with these experiences will say, this was super funny. This is so funny. Thank you, Mateo, for the great read. Or maybe other people will say, I don't get it. This sucks. Whatever. I've seen it all. It's okay.
It's also funny, even when it's real for us. Just one.
Yes, right? So with The Sellout, I saw that. I saw the subtext. I saw what was happening, you know, as people like to use with the label of satire. I saw the skewering of racism, of America, and I loved it. And I'm not gonna lie and act like I caught every single thing in the book because I knew he was doing so much that I was like, this is the type of book you probably need, or I probably would need to read 3 times, you know, to really get like 85% of everything. But that book and the fact that it was received well, and that it won the Man Booker. And of course, you know, like I was talking about earlier, not pandering to the industry or looking for all this external validation. A young writer in me saw that though, and said, wow, I feel as though I could push the envelope, that I could write something pushing the boundaries in the way that I want it to, and that it will still be able to be published so that it can resonate with the people I want it to resonate with. So definitely The Sellout, James Baldwin for sure. I read James Baldwin probably like in college, and I had to take a break after reading one of Baldwin's books because they got me so upset, and they got me looking at people different for a good week or two until it wore off a little bit. I'd like be on the subway and be like, what? Like, you know what I'm saying? I was angry. I was angry. So that stayed with me. The emotions. And for people who read Black Buck, some of them describe it as a roller coaster. I say it's more so a hostage situation where it doesn't let you go from the beginning. But what I've seen time and time again, and I love statistics, it's not like I'm writing things down, but I'm assessing patterns, at least qualitatively, from the feedback I get. And people say they felt so much. They felt so much. They didn't like Buck for 80% of it. And I'm okay with that. I did that intentionally so. Some people really like the ending, some people don't. But all I know is that they feel so many things, and some of them want to punch me in the face and other people want to hug me. And that for me is a win, because at least they feel something. You know, for me, I told myself that the biggest loss, and this could be part ego, but the biggest loss with this book is that if someone reads it and they say, okay, whatever, I'm going to forget about this tomorrow. So yeah, those are a couple people that influenced me. Of course, Toni Morrison, the way that she lived her life and how she was so I'm trying to think of the proper word here, but maybe I won't get it in time. She was so sure of her audience, and she did not care who she had to tell about it. So me coming into this industry and telling people I had Black people in mind when I wrote this, but I'm so happy that all of you read it. I've had people push back and say, what do you mean you had Black people in mind? You're a salesman. Don't you want to sell as many copies as possible? Why are you saying this? You should not be saying this. Two things can exist at the same time. it's not revolutionary for me to say that I had Black people in mind when I was writing this. The example that I use often is Ernest Hemingway wasn't writing for anyone like me, Christian, or you, Chaya, when he wrote The Old Man and the Sea. He didn't have us in mind. I don't know the man, but I've read one of his books, and I probably wouldn't read anymore. And I can say with like 90% certainty, he wasn't thinking about, you know, someone like you, me, or Christian reading his books. There's other white writers who I would say they took other people into consideration for sure, but not him. So it's not revolutionary for me to say this, but I've had people push back on it. Again, I'm just happy for anyone who reads the book because we only have so much time in this world. So that's just a long way of answering your question about influences. There's so many more. A white guy I love Philip Roth. I love Philip Roth. Such a smart writer. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there because we could go on for another hour about this.
Don't forget the second half, which is what you're working on now, or what we can hope to see from you next, or just
Consciously
get as general as possible, whatever you feel like saying.
All right, so I'm working on another novel, and that's all I'll say right now. You know, I'm not as like 24/7 Black Book promo as I was like a month ago, but we're still doing promo. We got the UK publication of the book coming out in May. So if you have other books coming out in other territories, it's like just a never-ending tour. So I have to get ready for that. But I will begin to carve out more time for the second novel. And then, you know, fingers crossed, we're going to be working on an adaptation. And I'm unlike Toni Morrison, where Toni Morrison was like, I don't care what they do with my books. Like, I wrote my books, Hollywood can do what they want. I want to be involved. And without going into too much detail, you know, Hollywood tries to sideline authors and people who write the work that they're going to adapt, but I'm going to be involved. So I don't know when that's actually going to start happening, but probably in coming months. So yeah, thanks.
So I want to leave time for Q&A and then Christian, or I think.
Oh yeah,
now
we'll jump in. I'm gonna intro Christian right now.
Yeah, intro Christian. Exactly. I turn it over to both of you.
Thank you. So I met Christian on an app called Clubhouse. For those who don't know, Clubhouse is basically like a series of conference calls around different topics. So if you're a writer, there are people hosting these rooms on writing. And then if you want to talk about stocks or cryptocurrencies or startups and so forth, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of rooms, and there's no face-to-face. It's like, imagine if we were just having a Zoom, but without face and only audio, and you can have hundreds of people in a room. It's called Clubhouse. So I was giving a talk there. It was either one about just, I have a book coming out, ask me anything that you want. And it would be me sharing information with people, because that is something that, and it's in the book too, I'm all about helping other people get ahead in any ways that I can. And information is power, right? It sounds corny, but true. And then I hosted another room on how to get the right agent, not just a agent, but the right agent. And Christian, I believe, was in the second room, maybe the first. He can tell me more. And he was asking me some questions. And I said, listen, man, you know, you're a poet. Feel free to share some of your work with me. I plan on having poets at some of my book events. And if it would be appropriate down the line, I'd like to invite you. So he generously shared some of his work with me. And I read it. I wasn't just all like, cool, man. Yeah, never spoke to. I read it. And I didn't read all of his poems. He sent a lot. He got a lot of material, but I read a good amount. And his poetry, it really resonated with me, especially, you know, poetry related to men and fathers. I like that a lot. And then that was it. He thanked me for looking at his work. And then, you know, Chaya reached out to me. We got this Belmont Books event going on. And I said, Christian would be good. Christian, are you free? He said, yes. And here he is, Christian Morris, everyone, here to share some of his work.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Yes, I sent you a lot of poems. I sent you a lot of poems. I'm so excited to share what I wrote for you guys today. Thank you, Chaya. And thank you, Belmont Books. This poem is called Us. We stood in the swelter and baked, sweat caked down faces, cold, wet bottles passed around to save us. COVID, who cares? They're killing us. Plus, we're masked and outside. Why are you mad at that? If you've ever been to a protest or opened a history book, then you know that protests are scary because of the police. Protests are scary because of the police. Still, I had to be there because when I get pulled over, I want to live. The first Chicago protest was what they meant by unrest. Folks watching in high rises were fine, it seemed, hearing sirens but not screams, and soon the darkness would shroud the beatings. I will never forget the arousal in the eyes of our public servants as the sun set, fingers throbbing and blood red wrapped tightly around their batons, salivating, waiting for darkness to give the order to crack skulls, go fuck those kids up. A voice on the radio goes. Locker room talk, right? I couldn't decide if I'd go to the next one to march, so I went to one after another. Biking miles, being beaten by the sun, skin crawling, heart boxing, headed deep into danger, assembling with masses in the face of terrifying blue strangers. But I knew the type. So did Sandra Bland and Freddie Gray and Fred Hampton and Emmett Till. But not Breonna. My sister never knew what hit her. When Breonna died, I felt as if I was walking to work and past a large blooming tree with a fresh, thick, sand-colored rope wrapped around a big branch, leading down to a black body with bulging eyes, me writhing, frozen in my tracks, breathlessly gawking at her body swaying in the summer wind. Then I simply shook it off, dried my face, and headed to work, knowing that what I had seen was an unacceptable reason to miss a work day. So I showed up like we always do. That's how it feels those days for white folks who are wondering. Dear Breonna, you are my mother, my sister, my colleague, my friend, my love. I think about you every day as I'm brushing my teeth before bed. Did you used to do that? Or pray? Dear Sandra, they got me fucked up if they think I don't know what they did to you and the best they could do was a fable about a garbage bag? America's baggage. Dang, Dear Angela, your 71 fist and fro defying gravity in the courtroom gave me the strength to make it through the summer. The electricity that crashed upward from the ground through me when I heard your voice live at the 17 Washington Women's March, and I knew we were breathing the same air. That summer, an international civil rights movement shook the sky so hard, a box broke loose from a cloud and fell. The winds tried to stop it. The trees scattered as the wooden relic was hurled at the earth by gravity. The box was ancient. Impact cracked the ground as it broke up. Its contents took a direct line through the earth to come back to me. It was, Babu bee boo babu boo babu bee 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 yeah babu bee boo wah. It was my voice. Now I see what happened to me, and I can never unsee the silence I've been. I will not stand by and wait to be saved. Do you see this face? This is a shade of black, a shade of gold, a shade of royalty, of magic, of hope, a shade of the place they call America. The myth. There's no such thing as America. So let me ask you this. When will guns and police stop killing us, the US? Thank you.
Whoa! Wow! My God!
Wow.
My God! That was.
Thank you.
Wow. Christian, my brother, there's people in the audience asking, what's the name of it? Do you have a website and so forth?
Yeah, it's called that poem I wrote yesterday. So it's called Us. It's nowhere but in my computer. But you can check out my work on Instagram. It's Bad B-A-D Christian, Christin. I'll put it into the chat. That's easier. But yeah, that's where you can check out my work and reach me.
Yesterday.
Please put it in the chat. Yeah, So
That's
many
what I'm
people.
talking about in terms of In Favor of Speed. He wrote it yesterday.
Yeah.
He told us that he wrote that months ago in June 2020 and worked on it for months. I would have believed it too.
I read it
Man.
yesterday.
Yes.
It's so good.
Really good. It's
Thank you so much.
really powerful. So
Yeah.
powerful.
My God.
It's just about my experience this summer. I talked to a friend the other day, and I realized that I really had like processed what went on this summer. So that's sort of a response to that.
I feel it.
If this were live in terms of us all being in the same room, there would have been a substantial silence
Yes.
after that poem in this room. You know, I definitely think you should picture that. That's because that was definitely, we were all muted, so you couldn't tell, but that was happening.
Oh man. There's just so much to it. The box and the voice. I was like, yo, my man, he needs a cough drop. What's good?
Oh, good. It was supposed to be tricky. So that's great.
At first, I was like, with the first call, I said, all right, is he doing this part of the bit? Then the second call, I was like, whoa, he really sold it to me.
You're like, what's going on?
I was like, he was on a roll, man. Anyway, thank you so much. Christian put his Instagram in the chat. I don't know if everyone can see it. I'm not sure. I just reposted it for panelists and attendees, but I think you can all see everything. Please reach out to him there if you want to talk more about his work or, discussing, if you can get a copy or so forth.
Yeah.
Great. We have some Q&A. Is Stacy going to hop back on to moderate?
Stacy's going to read you some questions, and there she is now. Hello there.
Oh, Christian, I have to say that was beautiful. And when you said that you wrote it yesterday, that's just amazing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have a question from Gautam. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize if I butchered your name. Can you please ask all the authors for any absurdist, obscure humor recommendation?
A couple that I think of in terms of books are The Spook Who Sat by the Door. It's the book that I would say is most closely in conversation with Black Buck. It's by an author named Sam Greenlee, and that was written in 1969. Portnoy's Complaint by Philip Roth. Again, bringing up Philip Roth. That book is just, it was banned. It was one of the most frank discussions of sexuality to have come out during the time it did. And don't quote me on the year. It could have been the 60s or the 70s. I don't know. I think it was the 70s. I'm not sure. But it was just wild. How to Make a Slave by Gerald Walker. I read that last year. He combines humor to underscore some of the horrors of systemic racism. I only say some because there are so many, right? And that book as well had some vibes of Black Buck, if you enjoy that. There's a book I'm reading right now. This is the last one that I'll mention. There's a book that I'm reading right now that hasn't come out yet. It comes out in June. It's called How to Kidnap the Rich by, what's his name? Raina Rahul, I believe his name is Raina Rahul. And that book, I'm halfway through, and it honestly, I'm not gonna oversimplify it, but if you read Black Buck and you read this book, you're gonna see a lot of overlap. But it takes place in India, and there are so many things where I'm like, okay, this wasn't written for me because I don't get it, and I like that. So those are my recommendations. I don't know about you, Christian, Chaya.
Read a lot of absurdist. I can't really think of any. Do you have any, Chaya?
Absurdist, not so much, but in terms of really trenchant humor, and I think Friday Black.
Oh, how could I forget?
Was pretty terrific. It's by our friend Nana.
Yes.
Nana Kwame Ajay Brenya. That is, it's funny, and there's a brutal absurdity, but in terms of it resonates with what's real. And then I think, Mohsin Hamid, how to get filthy rich in rising Asia. Yeah, that's a really different book, though. It's very interesting how differently the how-to concept can be spun. It's really, so I would throw out those two.
I'm so happy that you did, because Friday Black in many ways paved the way for me at HMH, my publisher, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah just did such an excellent job with that book. Excellent doesn't really capture it. He, as an individual, talking about literary citizens, is type of person just to help other people up. And I ended up signing with HMH, who published Friday Black, because I saw what they did with his book. And in terms of Mohsin Hamed, How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia, that's an answer that I sometimes give in terms of Black Buck, because that book, in addition to a few sales manuals by a guy named Jeffrey Gitomer, as well as The Residue Years by Mitchell S. Jackson, is what helped me after my fourth draft to realize that I'm already writing a sales manual. I knew that, but to push me to break the fourth wall in such a conspicuous way. So those books, the three of those different authors helped me. So I'm so happy that you brought that up, Chaya. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I think you already answered that one. Kara says, taking the voice of the audiobook out of contention, whose voice would you like the reader to hear for Buck's voice?
Damn, I've never been asked that before. Wow. Thank you, Kara. I'm not sure. I guess your voice, the reader's voice, whatever voice you hear when you read, I guess yours. And that's making me laugh, because that could really present some complications in terms of language used in the book. But yeah, your voice. I can't think of anyone else's. When I read and wrote the book, I was hearing multiple voices. I'm not gonna lie, right? Someone like Clyde. I was hearing what this individual sounded like. Soraya, they became so real to me. And readers tell me that these characters become so real to them too, that they begin to hear their own voices. And I don't think, aside from Wally Cat, maybe a couple other people, that I really described voices in the book, and I'm only realizing that now. But that's okay. You hear what you want. Talking about the audiobook, that is just such a different experience. I've listened to parts of it and I was blown away by the young brother Zeno Robinson, who narrated it. He just did such a great job, and I'm so happy that we found him, because we'd already had 4 or 5 auditions, and I had picked an individual out of those auditions, and I said, I'd love to find someone a little bit different with a little bit more swagger if possible. If not, let's go with this other guy. And they brought Zeno a day or two later, and I said, that's it, he's the one. So I'm happy that you listened to it, Kara, and thank you for your question.
Okay, we have an anonymous question that says, does some of Darren/Buck's bad luck come from the snow bunny curse, as Wally Cat warned? And also, thank you for this wonderful book. Absolutely loved it.
Thank you for reading it, anonymous attendee. I don't know if you're purposely anonymous because of that snow bunny comment. Listen, we're 2 for 2 right now. No one's ever brought this up. No one. I've done like 70 interviews by this point. No one has ever brought up the snow bunny curse. And listen, I hate to do this, but you're going to have to tell me. You're going to have to answer that on your own. No one's ever brought that up, and I'm super surprised. Maybe. I wouldn't want to blame what happens to Darren all on the fact because he, did that. A lot of it was his own doing, but who knows? Wally Cat warned him, 7 years bad luck. Thank you for the question.
Do you have any other questions? Well, while we're waiting for a minute to see if we do, I'm going to ask you all a question, which is if you could tell us what you're reading now, if anything.
I would love to know that too. And Heather, thank you for the recommendation of Lake Success. I'm going to look that up.
Yes.
I'm reading Cast by Isabel Wilkerson.
How's it going so far? I haven't read it, but I've heard that she goes in.
Oh, she goes in, but it's really a reframing of the way that we think about the mechanisms of racism and race in the U.S. And it really puts it into a greater context and clarifies how that actually works here in the U.S., which is fantastic.
Wow. Does she relate it to like the typical example of a caste system in India?
He does, yeah.
That's where, yeah, I was like, okay, she's either gonna do that or maybe it's just too obvious and she's not. Like,
she went to India for part of the research as well, so she definitely draws that line.
And that itself is such an interesting thing, because I actually have a piece coming out in Bustle about, reading from what my relatives in South India said about Blackness and how they thought about Blackness, and just the complex history of anti-Blackness in India, and how it's read into caste. Wouldn't you love to have, a lunch with Isabel Wilkerson to say, what was it even like to go to India?
Yeah.
What was that even like?
Yeah, I would love to have a lunch with her, period, but I would love to also discuss that.
So I'm reading 2 incredible books that I want to shout out, because both of them are by friends, but they're also amazingly talented women. One is The Arsonist City, which is about to come out later this year by Hala Alyan.
HMH, I think.
About, what'd you say?
I think it's an HMH book.
Probably, yes, it is an HMH book. And it's about, so many things: Palestine, Beirut, Lebanon, family homes, but ultimately it's really a very closely observed family, multi-generational saga. And it's so absorbing. I thought it was so well done. And moving. There are these unexpected revelations of what happens to certain characters that you think of a certain way, like, oh yeah, she just blows everything off, and then you find out what happened to her. You're like, oh, you're, and then the other really, really well done book is by Naima Koster, What's Mine and Yours, which I think also was a Jenna's book club selection. And Reese's, and it's getting all the love. But what is fascinating is it's getting the love as this quote unquote topical book about school integration, but it's not just about that. It's about interracial relationships, very closely observed, and not just white, black, but Latino, black, half Latino, half white, and biracial, black, white, like all these different permutations, and addiction, and really the impact of addiction on a family of one member over generations. So I would give a lot of love to those 2 books.
Thank you for sharing. I see one last question. I'm going to answer it, then I'm going to pass it back to you, Stacey. The audience got a bunch of book recommendations. I love this too, that we just had a book talk too. And the question is from Jessica Navarro. In one of your drafts, did Clyde get his? I've never had a character who I wanted to punch more. Thank you for making me care about these characters. I stayed until 3 a.m. to finish the book because I needed to know what happened to Darren and his family. To keep it real with you, Jessica, Clyde, he gets rocked in the face by Darren. We see that at the end. In terms of what happens to Clyde, TBD, to be decided, right? That's all I'm going to say. In no earlier drafts did I have, do I think that I had other things really happening to Clyde. With someone like Clyde, it's like, exactly, you said, because it's real. It's like, what would happen to him in this world? I don't want to give spoilers away, but he used his connections to quote unquote win in a way. But the concept of winning is put into question at the end of the book. There are people who read it and say, Mateo, I didn't like the ending because this, that, and the other happened. And I said, that's fine. I'm not here to judge your read. My take on it, though, is that Buck did actually still win because he changed the system and he created an organization that is bigger than him. Now, we don't know how long that organization is going to last. We don't know if it's going to thrive or it's just going to peter out, and it was a fad. But yeah, hopefully if we are able to, if and when we're able to adapt it into something on the screen, we'll get a lot more background on each character, including Clyde and what happens to them. I'll try to make sure that something really bad happens to him for you, Jessica.
Great. Well, it's 8 o'clock, so I think we're going to wrap up, but this was wonderful, really. Thank you all so much for participating in this. It was really just so great, and great questions, Chaya, just really thoughtful and great conversation. Great poem, Christian. I think everybody really enjoyed that. And we hope to see you all, or see in quotes, at future events. And I hope that you all stay safe and have a great night.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Chaya. Thank you, everyone who attended. Be safe, be well. Peace.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.